Everyone, my name is John Bracken. Welcome to today's, I'm at the Digital Public Library of America. Welcome to today's discussion about our work around Wikimedia. I'm gonna wait a moment while some of you click in. And as I'm looking and seeing folks popping in, I am so happy to see so many both familiar faces and new faces. I'm just here to sort of talk while people are logging in. And as I do so, I want to tell you a little bit of a story about how we got here. Maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, back when we would gather in person in people's homes, I had the pleasure of hearing Catherine Marr, who is the outgoing executive director of the Wikimedia Foundation, present to a group of Wikipedians and Wikipedia fans and give an overview of the work that Wikimedia Foundation was up to. And she emphasized Wikimedia's mission to unlock the world's knowledge, to make knowledge more accessible. And it reminded me very much of Digital Public Library's mission, which is to ensure equitable access to knowledge and information, and to really make sure that as we live in a digital world, that knowledge, information is more available in digital context rather than more restricted from our analog world. And the upshot of that, overlap of missions, thanks to the support of Sloan Foundation, enabled us to do the set of work and partner with the set of partners that you're going to get to hear about today. I'm sure you're going to hear these numbers later, but the fact that by working together, we've been able to upload over nearly 1.5 million images and photos and documents into the Wikimedia Commons, to impact over about 1,000 articles in Wikipedia and achieving 10 million views. For me, that is a really exciting, and this is within 1 year's worth of work, exciting window and sort of reimagination of two things that are really central to DPLA's work and so many of our partners, which is ensuring and maximizing use and access of the information available to us that we house within us. Everything we do here at DPLA is in partnership with others. And so that's why I'm particularly excited that we get to hear from Effie and Leigh from Smithsonian and from our Colorado hub, who have just been core partners of ours from the beginning. And so it's exciting that they're able to help tell the story of what's happening now. And with that, I'm really excited to be able to turn the mic over to Dominic Byrd-McDevitt, who has been part of the DPLA community for a long time, but been part of the core DPLA staff for the last year leading up this work. And Dominic, over to you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for joining us here today. Thanks to John for stealing my thunder. Get my screen sharing set up.
It's such good thunder, Dominic, that
Yeah, so as you heard from John, we're here to discuss DPLA's Wikimedia project, which we call it that because it primarily involves contributing to digital assets to Wikimedia Commons, which is a file repository for Wikipedia. So I'm going to first just run through what to expect today from this webinar. I'm going to first give an overview of Wikimedia's DPLA's Wikimedia project and how it's developed. And then you'll hear from Leigh Jeremias. Leigh is the digital collections coordinator for the Colorado State Library. She manages the Colorado Historic Newspapers collection and the Plains to Peaks Collective, the Colorado-Wyoming service hub of DPLA. And since last year, she's been leading that hub's efforts in participating in our Wikimedia project. After that, you will hear from Effie Kapsalis, who's the Senior Program Officer for Digital Strategy at the Smithsonian Institution. She's working with the Smithsonian's interdisciplinary museums, libraries, archives, and research centers to increase their relevance in the digital realm and to develop strategies to ensure the inclusion of underrepresented populations in a 175-year-old data set. I invited her here today to share some insights into what other DPLA partners are and how other DPLA partners are engaging with Wikipedia outside of this specific project that we'll be discussing. And also hopefully inspire you to think about ways in which you could get involved with an institutional strategy towards Wikimedia. And specifically, I wanted to talk about ways that this project that we're talking about can connect to the DPLA network's broader equity work by addressing content gaps and representation in public discourse as represented by Wikipedia. So in the interest of showing, not telling, or not bearing the lead, I'm gonna start here. So what we're looking at is an image from the Boston Public Library that's in a Wikipedia article. This was actually just added this Monday at an event I participated in by Boston Public Library staff. So this is the result of a several months long process that involved initial outreach between DPLA and representatives from Boston Public Library and Digital Commonwealth, the hub in Massachusetts. And then changes to Digital Commonwealth's mapping for its metadata ingestion to DPLA, institutional changes at Boston Public Library that resulted in implementation of standardized rights statements and changes to some of the rights statuses of their images. DPLA performing the actual uploads of their assets from Boston Public Library, and then training and support from myself from DPLA to the staff of the institution, and then finally the actual editorial work that resulted just this week in many additional images being added to articles. So it's a whole long process, and that's what we want to discuss here today. First, some basics. This project really owes a debt of gratitude to the Sloan Foundation, which provided the funding for our first year of this project, and to the Wikimedia Foundation, which helped DPLA conceptualize the project and has been a partner throughout, and we've been in constant conversation with. So it was almost a year ago today that we had our first webinar on the topic. This is what it looked like. And this is when we really publicly launched the project. So this webinar is really kind of a progress report on our activities since then, and also a call for new participants, because the project is really only continuing to grow right now. And I'm hoping that what you hear today kind of inspires you to join our effort if you're not already. So what we said back then was that we were intending to build a digital asset pipeline from DPLA, the DPLA network, to Wikimedia, to Wikipedia eventually. And with the main goal being to drastically increase access to our collections by leveraging one of the most visible platforms on the web. And essentially we said that as long as partners met certain data requirements, DPLA would perform all of the uploads as a service, and also provide training to partners on how to edit Wikipedia and add images to articles. So, just to reiterate, this project started as kind of nothing more than an idea in the beginning of 2020. And so I really want to start out by sharing what we've accomplished since then. The first and most important thing we've done is actually building the technology to make the pipeline that we originally promised and envisioned a reality. So this is due in large part to the DPLA technology team, and especially want to thank Scott Williams for a lot of the development work on this. And the way it works is this: if you provide us all the data that we need to be able to do an upload to Wikimedia Commons, and you opt in to the project, then your assets will begin to be uploaded, essentially on the same sort of regular schedule that metadata from your hub is ingested to DPLA. So I'll talk more about the requirements in a minute, but just want to point out, in our first year and a few months, we've actually done over 2 million uploads to Wikimedia Commons. When we first announced this webinar, however, a month or two ago, we were saying over 1 million. So that's how much it's progressed just in that time. Those uploads encompass over 650,000 DPLA items, so some of which are more than one individual media file. That makes us the largest single contributor to Wikimedia Commons ever in just this first year. Actually, we were already the largest contributor just when we hit the 1 million mark. And we actually just in an 8-day span in November, uploaded over 500,000 files just in those few days. So when we're talking about uploads, this is what it looks like. This is just an example of the kind of gallery view, a category on Wikimedia Commons of just the list of uploads that we've done. So this is the output of the actual, the technical work of the asset pipeline of just moving the images into Wikimedia Commons. I also want to acknowledge and thank all of the partners that we've worked with so far in all of these uploads. So these are the partners that have participated to date or have actually had media uploaded to Wikimedia Commons. So it includes the Plains to Peaks Collective, Digital Library of Georgia, Ohio Digital Network, the National Archives and Records Administration, Digital Commonwealth, the North Carolina Digital Heritage Center, the Portal to Texas History, and Indiana Memory. Also, just to acknowledge, in the months since that launch, I have spoken to representatives from more than half of all of DPLA's hubs. So many beyond these 8 have expressed interest, and many are already in different stages of making changes to their data or getting started on the project as well. Impact. We've measured over 16 million page views to DPLA assets on Wikipedia since we started the project, which is more than the rest of DPLA sees combined. This traffic so far comes from, as John said, just about 1,000 Wikipedia articles using DPLA images. There's still a huge amount of room for growth if we scale this project, to many more of DPLA's 4,000 institutions. I want to also give a special shout out to the work of the Toledo-Lucas County Public Library and the librarian John DeWeese there, whose work so far accounts for about half of all of the numbers that you see on the screen here, just from that single institution. And also, speaking of impact, I also want to acknowledge some of the other impacts beyond just these page view numbers. So we've seen effects of the project in other ways, such as the increased adoption of standardized right statements. When I started at DPLA at the beginning of 2020, there were about 6 million of DPLA's 40 million items that had standardized rights statements provided. Now the number is more than 25 million, more than half of DPLA items. And most of those were because of hubs that implemented rights statements in order to participate in this project. So one of my goals is that, you know, the impact that you're seeing in these numbers is helping to strengthen the value proposition for institutions and hubs to do the work of whether it's implementing rights statements, doing more copyright assessments, or adopting more open access policies. Another type of impact that we've had with this project is we actually, with the help of Report for America, DPLA was part of a partnership between the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library in North Carolina and the local Charlotte public media station, WFAE. And as we discussed in our Black Women's Suffrage webinar last fall, I personally mentored a local journalist in Charlotte to do writing on Wikipedia that was aimed at addressing content gaps in Wikipedia by covering local Black civic activism in Charlotte. So I'm going to just kind of get into some of the basics of how to get involved in the project. But then I'm going to hand it off to Leigh to talk about what that really looks like from the perspective of a hub that's done this. So these steps, this is what a typical project has looked like for each of those hubs that have seen the process through from the start to the end. The first step is really get in touch. Every hub or institution does things differently across the DPLA network. So this project really, every different participant that we've worked with has had their own needs, and so there's really individual outreach that has to be done. So this is my email address. Please reach out to me. This is kind of like a journey that we go on together. And if you're an institution that's not part of your hub's governance, you might also need to get in touch with your hub contact, if you can, to find out, you know, if they're already working with DPLA on this project, or if not, to express your interest to them. After that, typically we'll have a meeting and do what I'm calling here kind of like an audit or discovery, to look at the metadata you're providing and your mapping. If you've already implemented rights statements, how we would get access to your media, kind of like what the next best steps are in order for you to join the project. And then after that, it's there's work. I mean, typically, unless you already meet most of these, there's going to be some work from the hub to actually meet the data requirements and provide us what we need. Once that's done, then DPLA does the work of updating the hub's mapping, ingesting the locations to the media that we upload and the standardized rights statements, and then finally doing the uploads to Wikimedia Commons. Once there's media in Wikimedia Commons, then I provide a training for all of the institutional staff that would be involved in the project, because the last step is really the editing of Wikipedia articles, and that kind of the human editorial work that takes an image that just has been uploaded to a repository and actually puts it in context in a Wikipedia article where it's going to get access and views and generate the impact we're looking for. So lastly, I'll just spend a little bit of time talking about what I mean when I'm saying data requirements, because I know that's probably the main question people will have. There's two categories of that. One is when it comes to rights, For this project, any participant needs to have be providing standardized rights information to DPLA. That means that you have a valid rightstatement.org or Creative Commons license URI in an EDM rights field. The types of right statements that that are eligible for upload to Wikimedia, because it's an open access only project, are these 5. Note copyright in the United States. That first one is by far the most common that people will have. If you also use some of these other Creative Commons tools like CC0, CC by SA, or public domain mark, those are also compatible. And the last thing is that we need actually to have access to the media to be able to upload that. And that's not something that DPLA has required or requires generally. So what that looks like is that you would begin providing a IIIF manifest URL if you have IIIF implemented, or an institution does. Or if not, you would provide a list of links, direct links to the assets for a given item. And then once you're providing that in your data, then we would take that and update your mapping and begin ingesting those new fields. Once all of those things, those criteria are met, then any item that meets those criteria is considered eligible for upload. And once you do that, we actually have a new category in our DPLA analytics dashboard where you can see your what we call Wikimedia readiness. This displays all of the items for a hub or at the institution level that are eligible for upload to Wikimedia Commons based on meeting those criteria. So having said all that, this is my last slide. I'm going to pass it to Leigh, who is going to talk more about what this whole process looks like from the perspective of a hub and the institutions that have actually gone through this process and have been able to do this all successfully. So Leigh, take it away.
Hi, I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. Hi, thanks Dominic and the DPLA for having me today. As Dominic said, I helped manage the Plains to Peaks Collective and the Colorado-Wyoming DPLA Service Hub. And I'm going to share a little bit today about our hub's perspective and workflow with the DPLA Wikimedia project. We really jumped at the opportunity to share items with Wikimedia because of Wikimedia's wide reach and its large and active user base. We really see this as an opportunity to be proactive and bring items to where users already are, and to not just rely on users coming to us. So I'm going to jump right into the challenges that we knew we would face with this project. One of the good news is that all of our partners are using right statements, .org statements. When we became a hub, we made the decision to make that a requirement. This was a few years ago when we became a hub, because at the time there was some thinking that DPLA would make it a requirement. So we decided to be proactive and just make it a requirement for our hub. That requirement puts some of our partners in a good position to share items with Wikimedia because they have already evaluated their rights on an item by item basis. But one of the challenges is that many of our partners are fulfilling that requirement by using the statement copyright not evaluated. In other words, we know that many of our partners will need to do rights work if they want to share items with Wikimedia, and this could be challenging for them. Also, like many other hubs, our partners use a variety of different systems, such as Content DM, Luna, DSpace, Past Perfect, etc. But Before diving into this project, we had to figure out the different ways in which these systems share either the IIIF manifest and or how they share the full media file. During this process, we discovered that not all systems are able to share full these files. For example, Past Perfect, we found, can share the fullest version of an item provided by a partner, but at the moment they can't share all the images included for an object, such as all the pages, such as all the pages of say, a document. Like many institutions, our partners are facing challenging times and are stretched even more thin than they were in the past. We wanted to ensure that this project did not feel like another thing that was put on our partners' plates. So our approach has been to let partners choose whether or not they would like to share items with Wikimedia, and this might be different than other hubs that are participating. As a hub, we still have contributing partners that are hesitant to share full media files. For the most part, only partners that want to share items with Wikimedia are sharing a IIIF manifest or the full media files with us. We also let DPLA know prior to each ingest if a new partner would like to share items with Wikimedia, and they will only pull appropriate items for those particular institutions or partners. We also wanted to start slow with this project by proving concept and working with partners that we consider low-hanging fruit, partners that we knew would be able to fulfill the rights requirement and provide the IIIF manifest. As a hub with a small amount of staff, we knew we could not take on all the long-term work of adding images to articles and creating new articles. However, initially we are prepared to take on the work of adding items to articles in order to prove the benefit of participation. We also wanted to show and stress that this project, for the most part, only builds upon the hard work that our partners have already done. Partners that participate in the DPLA have already digitized their collections and created and shared metadata. This work has made it relatively easy for them to share items with another platform. I'll just talk a little bit about my workflow to adding items to Wikipedia articles. My workflow, again, might be a little different than a partner that actually holds the material and contributes content. While we manage the hub, we are not a contributing institution, so I'm not as close to the content as a contributing partner is likely to be. So my workflow was really to browse the PPC material being contributed to Wikimedia and see sort of what jumped out at me and find items that I thought might have related Wikipedia articles. For example, in this slide, you can see the image of the badger contributed by the National Wildlife Research Center. And then once I found it in that listing, I looked for an article on badgers, and I added it to that article. I found the task of adding the image to be simple and very similar to adding media to a WordPress site or blog post. This really only took me a few minutes. Once we were contributing items to Wikimedia, we did have some training with Dominic, but a lot of the items that I shared that I added to Wikipedia articles, I did prior to that training because the process is pretty simple to navigate. Most of the content you see on the slide, I added in mid-January and spent about a total of an hour adding these 12 items. And this time also included me getting used to the process. Many of the items I added were maps or bird's eye views of towns in Colorado. So these were relatively easy additions that took very little thought. As a contributing institution might have more knowledge of a particular item or subject matter. So what they choose to add or write about might have more depth than my additions. As you can see, the more well-known the town, the more views the item and page received. And collectively, these items have seen just over 39,000 page views in February, and this was just 12 items. So our future work with this project, we want to continue to educate our partners about right statements and the use of use the Wikimedia project as an added benefit of doing the important work of evaluating rights. We also know that adding images to existing Wikipedia articles is only part of the project. We need to be creating articles too. However, this does bring up one of the challenges we face, our partners' time and effort, which is limited. Again, with this, we would like to build upon work that we and our partners are already doing by possibly repurposing blog posts that have already been written, or maybe text, for example, from exhibits that has already been created. Hub is also working to add new partner content to Wikimedia. We have a partner institutions whose online collection was created with the generous help of Professor Christina Matusiak and students from the University of Denver's MLIS program. Once this collection is added to Wikimedia, we will work with those students to prototype a student or volunteer project that will add items to existing Wikipedia articles, as well as create new Wikipedia articles. This product we hope could be replicated to help other hub partners in their Wikimedia work. In the future, we hope to engage not only MLIS students, but also students in other related departments, such as the Department of History. In the end, our experience has been that this is another avenue of access to our partners' collection. It enhances the historical record, and so far has taken little work on our end and our partners' end. Of course, the more you put into it, and the more you are likely to get out of it. With that in mind, as a hub, we aim to create an environment of support for our partners so they don't feel as if they're going it totally alone. That's the last slide I had, and I'll hand it off to Effie.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be with you today. In putting this together, I was remembering that Dominic was one of our Wikipedians in residence at the time that we started this work. So it was nice to use this opportunity to go back and look at all that's changed. So I'm going to be going through about a decade of engagement with Wikipedia, and here are just a few of the events that have been hosted across our 19 museums and research centers, libraries, and archives. And I'll summarize how we're going deep in the topic of women in American history, and then reflect on some of the challenges of participating in Wikipedia. But this project is a great model that Dominic and Leigh were talking about for an easier way to get in. So it's really great to see other people thinking about this. So first, a story. On October 4th, 1960, Eastern Airlines Flight 375 took off from Boston Logan Airport. 6 seconds after takeoff, the plane spun out of control and fell into Boston Harbor. 62 people died. Investigators scoured the wreckage for clues, and they found in the plane's engines pieces of dark feathers. Unsure what to do with it, they boxed it up and sent it to the Smithsonian. This box was handed to Roxy Laybourne, who was an expert in the subtle plumage differences in birds. Through this experience, Laybourne realized the practical application of the museum's bird collections, which sparked the founding of a new field of study called forensic ornithology. Laybourne was responsible for improving the safety of a multi-million-dollar industry at the time. When I was at the Smithsonian Archives, Roxy Colley-Laybourne existed as a name in a folder, in a box, in a finding aid, so relatively buried in our own website. Because of this, and that there was little information to find about this woman who contributed so much to history, we started to write about her in blog posts and a campaign that we conducted called Women in Science Wednesday. Little did we know that these articles would start to create secondary sources, and secondary sources are needed for Wikipedia. So seeing that this was happening kind of organically, but slowly without us, we brought in Sarah Sturch, who was the first Wikipedian in residence at the Smithsonian. And she partnered with Wikimedia DC on a series of Women in STEM editathons, which resulted in 100 new articles and hundreds of articles improved. And it's really rewarding to see Roxy Colley-Laybourne up front when you do a search on her name. And why is this important? Well, women are less visible online, and increasingly Wikipedia is used by major tech companies for delivering content to people's devices, like home assistant devices like Alexa, like our smartphones, if we're Googling a term that we don't know. If an image doesn't exist, or if the facts of this person doesn't exist, you likely give up on your search. Now, we're focusing on women because of the American Women's History Initiative, and Wikipedia seemed like a really natural partner there because they face their own challenges with gender balance. And we as cultural organizations share those challenges. We have less records about women and about marginalized communities around the US. And since we're focusing staff and resources on increasing the scholarship about American women, we wanted to share that as openly as possible. So 18% of bios on Wikipedia are about women, and it takes a long time to really affect this number. And part of the problem is the contributors to Wikipedia. There are not a lot of women, so you'll notice a lot of kind of topics that are traditionally more associated with men, like military history, TV and film. I mean, women love TV and film, but there are just a lot more articles about topics that men pay more attention to. So because our goal with the American Women's History Initiative is to ensure that the role of women in history is well known, accurate, acknowledged, and empowering for citizens, we were able to get funding for a Wikipedian in residence for gender equity. And we're also looking at other ways of increasing data about women. Now, just because you have a curator who's studying women's history does not mean records are created. So we have a digital curator position who's creating records and structured data instead of exhibitions. We're also looking at machine learning. We have a small team of data scientists who have started to do natural language processing and analysis of our collections to try and bring back together the accomplishments of women that are distributed across our ecosystem. And crowdsourcing is where Wikipedia comes in. So Kelly Doyle is working on diversifying the crowdsourcing task to lower the barriers to participation. So like what Leigh's doing, just adding an image, that is wonderful. We also find that information boxes are a good place. That's that right side panel of a Wikipedia article that tends to kind of be pushed forward when you do a search online. So it's just the facts, date of birth, date of death, place where someone was born, where they were educated. And what we've been finding is a lot of these are less filled out for women. So that's one of our micro crowdsourcing tasks that we're working throughout the pandemic in virtual edit-a-thons. We're also partnering with organizations like Whose Knowledge, Wiki Women in Red, and others to try and encourage more women and people from diverse backgrounds to create a friendly space so they can contribute as well. So I think this is the summary of 2020. We hosted 12 edit-a-thons. 8 of those were online, which we quickly spun up with the quarantine back in March. Given our focus on women and that we're trying to get really good records out there, and also that we didn't quite have an open access policy at the beginning of the year, our contributions were more bespoke and focused. So we added 275 images of American women, and with great results, close to 500,000 in views, and that was in less than a year. I think that was 9 months. Articles edited over 100, references added. This is another great small bite-sized task, is adding a reference to something that you have online. And I just popped in a link below. If anyone wants to join in any of our edit-a-thons related to women, we welcome you. This year, we're going to scale up the process in a couple ways. One is with the digital curator who's embedded at the Smithsonian Libraries and Archives, Dr. Liz Harmon. This is a crowdsourced list of structured data about Smithsonian women in science. And these were the first and seconds in every field from astronomy to zoology. And a lot of these women just didn't have really great records of their contributions. Dr. Harmon has grown this list from 100 names to over 500 names. And is really digging into the data to make sure we have reliable resources for them. And we're going to be working with our new Wikimedian at large, Andrew Leigh, to develop the workflows to share this list out into Wikidata, to then create stub articles to get these women known online. And this is named after Dr. Vicky Funk, who was a botanist, and she's the one who crowdsourced this list with our staff. So now I'm going to hit on some of the challenges for us as cultural organizations working with Wikipedia. I think a lot of what Dominic and DPLA are doing is helping with that. You need your helpers in Wiki world to help you navigate this really complex ecosystem with kind of weird coding that doesn't always make sense to you and me, even as someone who's worked in digital for years. We also recognize that we have to commit resources from our digital and communications department, and those tend to be areas that are really under-resourced to do this kind of work. Notability criteria for marginalized communities, for women, is kind of too high when a lot of those resources just don't exist online. So I've seen things that even have links get taken down for notability criteria, which didn't make a lot of sense. And just like any major tech platform, there's harassment, and you need people who kind of understand the norms to push back on people when they get rude. I forgot to mention the one other project that we're doing, and this is with Wiki Education and our affiliates across the US. And we're going to be working on collecting their lists of notable women in American history so we can help share that more regional history into Wikipedia as well. And so those lists will be incorporated into Wiki Education's work with universities. They train professors to assign tasks related to creating Wikipedia articles in the classroom. So that's where I'm going to end. I think it's really important to think about how what we share is influencing what we know online. And the labor is extra to dig out those names of people who are less represented in history. But I think this is a really critical area that we need to focus on as a sector to make a difference in what our kids learn in the future. So that's about it. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I'm gonna open it up for questions now. We have under 15 minutes. Our Director of Community Engagement, Shanae Vet-Moran, will help us keep time and chime in at the end to make some announcements as well. Just to get started, I'll address some of the questions that had already come in. So Michael asked, did we lose the question? Michael asked, oh, here, sorry. Please define full media file, which was something that I and maybe Leigh also used earlier. So what we're talking about here is previous to this project, DPLA. This is really DPLA's first project that involves collecting assets and not just thumbnails. So DPLA has a field called preview, where you provide your thumbnail link. The reason that we're asking for the full media file is because what we want to upload is both the full resolution file, or the whatever large resolution you release to the public, and also many items may be more than one actual media file associated with a given item. So we have a new field in DPLA's data model this year for this project called Media Master, and that's a multi-value list of your asset links just for that purpose. And otherwise, if you provide the IIIF manifest URL, then we would use that to get the full media. So we had a couple of questions come in while I was saying that. Do you have a program or tutorial session to get familiar the use ad editing with the, I'm assuming, use ad editing in Wikimedia, but not necessarily to contribute images in a big patch yet? So what I would say is there's definitely resources out there, like you said. Effie has, the Smithsonian is doing a lot of events, and the best way to learn is to participate in an event. In terms of specifically with the kind of skills that we're targeting for this project, just always feel free to reach out to me. And I am definitely, like I said, we start out with just kind of like going through together with institutions. And so I'm very happy to, walk you through Wikipedia, and even if that involves showing you how to make edits. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that as well, Leigh, about the best way to get involved. I actually, before I did have one question that was going to be queued up, which I think is related to this, Leigh, for you to start a conversation, which is if you could just kind of share more about the actual process of learning to make an edit to Wikipedia. Like, Effie has edited Wikipedia for many years now, but prior to this year, this was your learning experience. Like, how long did it take to actually learn to make an edit? How long did it take to actually make one of those edits of adding an image to an article?
It took me probably an hour to figure it out. I mean, really, if you're creating blog posts and adding images to a WordPress site, it's very similar, I felt, and easy to navigate. There wasn't a big learning curve for me. I was just working on this morning, and I'm happy to share sort of a step-by-step in terms of a guide for just the images, not creating articles. I imagine if I was going to create an article, that would be something I would be wanting to talk to Dominic about and having, training from him or, somebody else. But just adding images was really simple. And again, I'm happy to share my little tutorial that I was going to share with our hub partners. Really what I was doing was you know, as I said when I was, you know, doing my short presentation, like for me, not being a, you know, of course I have a sense of Colorado and Wyoming history, but we're not contributing partners. So I don't have necessarily in-depth knowledge of items and their history and their story on an item by item basis. So for me, it was really taking a look at the items that we are contributing, all the items that we are contributing, and seeing what sort of jumped out at me that I thought might have a Wikipedia article. They said that the, you know, item that was an image of a badger, that was pretty, you know, easy to guess that there might be a Wikipedia article about that. And then, you know, just adding that, it was a short couple steps to add that image to that article.
Great, thanks. There were a couple of questions, one early on from Emily about more detail about the process of like that original meeting data requirements, and then what it looks like after that for subsequent ingests. So really, the way we envision it is that this process is essentially an offshoot of each hub's ingestion process, which, you know, occurs hopefully at regular intervals. So there's an upfront cost before your first uploads because you need to meet the data requirements, and you haven't necessarily done any of this before. But really, the hope is that and also it's an upfront cost for DPLA because that's when we're uploading probably the largest number of uploads because it's everything that's, you know, eligible for the whole hub. And then in subsequent ingests, we would just upload whatever is newly eligible, which is going to be a much smaller number unless you have like a new institution coming on board. And there should be less work on the part of the partners because you've already done the work to meet the requirements, and then hopefully you're just, you know, providing whatever changes there are to your metadata. So that's the goal. It looks like there's also a couple of questions, maybe people that are interested more in learning more about your work. Effie, do you want to say any more about how people can get involved?
Sure. So we got funding to work with our regional affiliates, which is a network of 240 museums, which you know, is kind of a big step for us because we've always worked in our own 19 museum ecosystem. So we're really testing out the waters with that process because we want it to be a way that organizations can work on their own things and have a crowd built in to be able to share those resources. So, you know, right now, if you have names of women, I would suggest going to Wiki Women in Red, which has a huge volunteer base around it, and you can add names according to different field of work and things like that. And in all likelihood, like I've seen with our own lists, the red links become blue over time, and you can get some great traction there. I would say start attending our edit-a-thons. I'll pop in a link to those, and we'll definitely be mentioning when we can open up and partner with more organizations, but it's going to take more resources than we have right now. And we also just got word that we're going to be building a new museum related to women's history. So I'm still having to make the case for why we need to invest in Wiki, which actually it's getting a lot easier because the impact is really powerful.
Great. There's a couple of other questions about ingestion and upload and syncing for updates. Sorry. The question from John, actually, I wasn't, this is maybe going more into the weeds, but it's worth noting that DPLA's data requirements changed a little bit over time in our first year. So we were originally uploading from some hubs that aren't yet providing IIIF manifests or media information. So the goal is that everybody who meets the current data requirements will have subsequent uploads. Some of, not to name names, some of the hubs on that list of ones that have already had uploads are not yet able to have subsequent uploads until they're providing that data. So that's one reason that some of the hubs haven't had more recent uploads. But yes, like Jennifer asked how we're handling if metadata changes, and this is kind of related because our original funding in the original project was really focused on getting things out there and into Wikimedia Commons. And this is what we're starting to think about for the next stage of this project. And we're actually looking for additional funding now for more development, which is the idea of data synchronization. Because we know that the metadata in DPLA, changes over time. But that right now we're essentially treating every upload to Wikimedia Commons as a one-off. So we have further work to do on the pipeline to make it more synchronized, where when not just when there's a newly eligible item, but when a previously uploaded item changes its metadata in some way, that we're pushing that change to Wikimedia Commons as well. So that's something that's been on our radar since the beginning, but isn't yet implemented in the technology that we've developed. And hopefully will be this year if we're able. But that's probably all I can say about that. I think that we have answered most of the questions. And with 3 minutes remaining, it's probably a good time to throw it to Shanae if you're ready.
Yes, I am here. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all again for joining us. I'd like to say a special thank you to the Sloan Foundation for their support of the Wikimedia Project, and again to thank the 8-member hub for partnering with us. In addition to the data synchronization that Dominic just shared, in year 2, we're planning more of the work that Effie described, leveraging the millions of assets that we've uploaded and will continue to add to the Commons, and working on supporting contributing partners as they coordinate with the Wikimedia community around generating content and stories about civic issues, the history of neighborhoods, and key local figures with those assets. The expansion of the work is twofold. One, to increase the visibility and usage of our partners' materials, and 2, to bring value to library users by conducting outreach and article creation that fills the gaps, increases representation, and fulfills their needs for open, freely accessible information that is both relevant and reflective of the voices, perspectives, and histories of their communities. And we've heard that in partnerships with Charlotte Mecklenburg Library, where Dominic was a Wikimedian in residence around their Engage 2020 project. In closing, I want to share some save the dates and invite you all to continue to be in conversation with us to learn more about DPLA projects. And these are 2 opportunities to hear perspectives from throughout the field and throughout our network on projects that they're leading to guide our users and journey with them to discover our materials and create, new knowledge and collaboration with their local communities, like our ideas for the future of the Wiki work entails. The first is our Network Council meeting on April 8th. You all will, network reps will receive a reminder. If you're on this call, please encourage your reps to attend. And our Open Community Board meeting on April 9th, and that registration is completely open. On the 9th, it will feature Crosby Kemper of IMLS and Mary Lee Kennedy from ARL to discuss what they've learned as far as coordinating work and changes and funding as a result of COVID-19. So we hope to see you all there. Thank you all for joining us. Dominic, Leigh, Effie, incredible insight, and we're glad to celebrate this 1 year. So many positive outcomes in a difficult time. So thank you for joining us.